Hi there. Today I want to tell you about an interesting case I ran into, partly out of carelessness and partly out of laziness. It's something that's generally recommended to do, but things still work even without it. When defining components, we should always wrap their content inside a single element, whether it's a div, a span, or another HTML tag. Something that can be treated as one consistent block later on. I will show you what happened to me when I didn't follow that rule and what kind of problems it caused. As you can see, we have a simple web page I'm showing. It displays two identical elements. One of them is a plain HTML and the other is a component that contains exactly the same content. In this component, however, I forgot to wrap everything inside a single HTML element. Instead, I just have a separate h1 heading and a separate paragraph standing on their own. Now take a look at what happens when I add the bordered class to the element that wraps our component. Everything looks nice, just the way it should. However, if I assign that same class directly to the component itself, the styling disappears and we lose the effect entirely. Now let's see what happens when I wrap everything in a div inside the component and what difference that makes. As you can see, once I wrapped all the component's content inside a single div, everything went back to a normal. The bordered class was correctly applied to the component. This happens because Vue.js now knows exactly where to attach that class. It has one root element that it generates and to which it can assign the bordered class. You can clearly see this in the page source. When a component is wrapped in a single div, the bordered class is applied to that element, but if we don't have that wrapper, Vue.js gets confused. It doesn't know where to attach the class, so it simply skips it. That's one example. Now let me show you another issue that that gave me a bit of headache today. For a moment, I couldn't figure out why the app was behaving incorrectly. Let's say we want to define something simple that lets us mark clickable element in our app, so that users can easily tell what can be clicked. The simplest way to do that, of course, is to create a directive. Vue.js makes it really easy. We can extend an element that the directive is applied to. So, as you can see, I'm creating a new directive inside the plugins folder that's according to the Nuxt specification in the file directives.client.ts. I'm defining a directive called clickable, which changes the cursor style on the element. I will also add a background color change just to make it more obvious that the element is clickable. From this point on, whenever we use this directive, we can very easily mark which elements are clickable, even if they are not natively clickable elements like, for example, buttons. As you can see, once I applied the clickable directive, the element changed its appearance. This is of course the plain HTML element the directive was attached to, so everything was as expected. Maybe let's improve a little bit this directive. I will make the color change when we hover over the element that uses this directive. And to keep things simple, I'm just adding two event listeners directly to the element. Of course, this isn't the recommended approach in the real applications. I am only doing it here to quickly demonstrate how it works. On mouse enter, we will set the background color to yellow, and on mouse leave, we will remove it. Again, as I mentioned, in a real-world application, you wouldn't handle this in this way, for performance reasons, of course, unless you also took care of removing those listeners later on. But for now, let's just see how our directive behaves now. As you can see, the directive works perfectly on our plain HTML element. It also works if we attach it to the div that wraps our component. However, if we apply the directive directly to the component itself, it stops working. Vue.js doesn't know what to do with it or where exactly to attach it. Just like with the class we looked a few seconds ago. And again, once we wrap everything inside a single div within the component, the directive starts working properly. So, with this short example, I hope it clearly shows why it's important not to forget to wrap all your component content inside one root element. Even though Vue.js can technically handle components without it, it is a still good practice and something we should always keep in mind, as that's the rule Vue.js expect us to follow. Just to avoid this strange behavior of our application.